first rule Dakota remembered was simple: never whistle at night. His grandfather had told him that when he was a boy, long before Dakota understood why the woods could feel alive in ways that didn't make sense. Back then, it had sounded like just another warning meant to keep kids close to the fire. Now, standing knee-deep in snow with the last light dying behind the pines, Dakota understood it wasn't a suggestion. It was a boundary, and something had already crossed it. Dakota had come back to the forest because he needed to, not for tradition, not for pride, just necessity. Winter had settled in harder than expected, and the nearest town was too far, the roads unreliable. His truck had died 2 days ago. No signal, no easy way out. The kind of situation his grandfather used to say the land tested you with. So Dakota did what he was taught. He packed light, moved carefully, and followed the old hunting paths his family had used for generations. But something was wrong. He noticed it first in the silence, not the peaceful kind, the deep, empty kind. No wind through branches, no distant birds. Even his own footsteps sounded wrong, swallowed too quickly by the snow. The woods weren't resting. They were holding their breath. By the time Dakota spotted the tracks, the sky had already gone gray-blue. They were large, too large, not bear, not moose. They stretched long across the snow, spaced unevenly, like whatever made them didn't walk right. The stride shifted, sometimes too far apart, sometimes dragging. He crouched, brushing away the top layer of frost. The edges weren't clean. They looked melted, as if the snow itself didn't want to hold their shape. Dakota stood slowly, scanning the tree line. "Not mine to follow," he muttered under his breath. Another thing his grandfather used to say: if the land shows you something unnatural, it's not an invitation, it's a warning. He turned away from the tracks. That's when he heard it. A voice, faint, carried on something that wasn't quite wind. Dakota. His body went rigid. It was his mother's voice, soft, familiar, impossible. She had passed 3 winters ago. The voice came again, a little clearer this time. "Dakota, help me." He shut his eyes. Rule 2, don't answer what calls from the dark. He didn't respond, didn't move toward it, just stood there, steadying his breath, letting the sound drift around him like smoke. The voice shifted, cracked, then twisted into something that wasn't his mother anymore, too stretched, too hollow. And then silence. Dakota didn't waste time after that. He set up a small shelter between 2 fallen trees, built a fire low and controlled, just enough to keep from freezing. He kept his back to the trunk, eyes scanning the woods. Night settled fully, and the forest stayed wrong. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't behave normally out there. Then came the smell. Rot, not the natural kind. No, this was sharper, colder, like decay that had frozen and thawed too many times. Dakota's grip tightened around the knife at his side. He wasn't a stranger to fear, but this wasn't fear. This was recognition. Something moved between the trees, tall, too thin. It didn't step so much as shift, like its limbs weren't entirely under its control. Dakota kept still. The fire flickered low, casting uneven shadows that stretched and snapped back. The figure stopped just beyond the light, watching. He couldn't see its face clearly, but he felt its attention, focused, hungry. Then it spoke. Cold, tonight. The voice was wrong, layered, like multiple sounds trying to fit into one shape. Dakota said nothing. The figure leaned slightly forward, bones, too long, pressed against skin that looked stretched tight, pale in the firelight. "Dakota," it said again. This time, it sounded like his grandfather, perfectly. For just a second. That second almost broke him. Almost. But Dakota remembered something else. His grandfather never called his name like that. Never soft, never pleading, always steady, grounded. This voice wasn't asking. It was trying. Dakota finally spoke, but carefully, measured. "You don't belong here." The thing tilted its head, a slow, unnatural motion. Then it smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to show teeth that didn't match the shape of its mouth. "Hungry," it whispered. The word seemed to sink into the ground itself. Dakota's breath fogged in front of him. "Go," he said firmly. The creature didn't move. Instead, it stepped closer, 1 foot into the firelight. The snow beneath it darkened instantly, not melted, corrupted. Dakota stood. That was a mistake. The creature moved faster than it should have been able to. One moment, it was at the edge of the light. The next, it was inside it. Too close. Dakota swung the burning branch he'd pulled from the fire. The creature recoiled, not in pain, but irritation. Fire wasn't enough. Of course it wasn't. This wasn't something you fought. This was something you survived. Dakota ran, not blindly, never blindly. He moved through the trees with purpose, following the land's shape, avoiding deep drifts, keeping his breathing controlled. Behind him, he heard it. Not footsteps, something worse. A dragging, uneven motion that gained ground too quickly. And the voices, they came again, different this time. Children, crying, calling his name, each one wrong in a slightly different way. Each one designed to make him hesitate. He didn't. The forest thickened, branches clawed at his jacket, slowed his steps. The cold bit deeper now, stealing strength from his muscles. He needed something, a break, a barrier, anything. Then he saw it, an old structure half buried in snow, wooden, collapsing, but standing, barely. Dakota pushed inside. The door hung loose behind him. The air inside was stale, but warmer than outside. He didn't question it. He moved quickly, blocking the entrance as best he could, reinforcing it with broken planks. Then he listened. Nothing. No movement, no voice, just silence again. But this silence wasn't empty. It was waiting. Minutes passed, then a slow scrape against the wall. Dakota froze. Another scrape, circling, testing. The structure creaked under pressure. The thing wasn't trying to break in. Not yet. It was learning. Dakota's eyes adjusted to the darkness. That's when he saw it. Symbols carved into the inner beams of the cabin. Old, deliberate, protective. He stepped closer, running his fingers lightly over one. A memory surfaced, not his own, his grandfather's voice again. There are places that remember how to say no. Dakota swallowed. "Then say it," he whispered. Outside, the scraping stopped. The silence returned. He almost believed it had gone, until the voice came again, right against the wall, clear, calm, patient. "You will starve in there." Dakota didn't answer. "You will freeze." Still nothing. A pause. Then, "I won't." The words landed heavy, because they were true. The thing outside didn't need warmth, didn't need rest. It could wait longer than Dakota could last. That was its advantage. Dakota closed his eyes, thought. This wasn't about strength or speed. It was about understanding. The Wendigo, he didn't say the name out loud, was hunger. Endless, unbalanced. It took and took and took. So what did it not understand? Dakota reached into his pack, pulled out the last of his food, dried meat, hard, precious. He stared at it for a long moment, then stood, moved to the center of the cabin, and placed it on the floor, an offering, not to the creature, to the land. "I'm not taking more," he said quietly. The words felt heavy, real. "I'm done." Outside, something shifted. Not movement, something deeper, like the forest itself had noticed. The air inside the cabin changed, subtle but undeniable. The pressure lifted, just slightly. Then came the sound, not from the creature, from the trees. A low, almost imperceptible creak, like something ancient adjusting its weight. The thing outside hissed, the first real emotion it had shown, anger, sharp, sudden. It struck the wall once, hard. The entire structure shuddered, but didn't break. Dakota stood his ground, didn't move toward the door, didn't speak. Another strike, then another, each one weaker than the last. Finally, silence, true silence this time, the kind the forest had been missing. Dakota didn't move for a long time, even after the first bird call returned, even after the faint light of dawn seeped through the cracks in the wood. When he finally stepped outside, the tracks were gone. No sign of the creature, no melted snow, nothing, just untouched white stretching between the trees. But Dakota knew better. Things like that didn't disappear. They retreated, waited for imbalance, for hunger, for someone to forget the rules. He looked back at the cabin once, then toward the path home. As he walked, he kept his head down, his steps steady, and his voice silent. Because some things in the woods aren't chasing you, they're listening, waiting for you to answer, and once you do, they don't stop.